Hi guys, my name's Colin and this is Colin Talks Crypto. This video is going to be different. I'm just going to give you my opinion on things, and I'm basically going to explain to you why I have a bearish outlook for the future. This includes the economy, this includes geopolitical issues. Most pertinent to this channel, this really applies to why I think we're going to see lower prices for crypto, specifically Bitcoin and definitely the altcoins. And this video, like I said, is going to be different. I'm going to touch upon some topics here, and these are probably going to be not agreed by a lot of you guys or some of you. Some of you may think what I say is ridiculous, conspiracy theory. I'm just sharing with you my opinion of things. I'm just going to tell you what I think is going on in the world. And I'm going to give you a real big 1,000-foot view of the past few years and what I think is happening and how this correlates to the economy, where we're at today, and where I think we're heading. And it also explains why I have cash on the sidelines, some cash. I mean, basically right now my portfolio is like 70 or 75% Bitcoin, 25% cash. I mean, pretty simple portfolio right now. I'm probably too heavy Bitcoin for what I'm going to tell you, but I can't get myself out of the crypto game just out of fundamental belief in it as a technology. I need to be exposed to cryptocurrency because I do think that it is the future. So let's go back a couple of years. 2020. What happened in 2020? Well, we had the pandemic, the start of the COVID-19 virus, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. And I want you to keep in mind during this video, I'm not saying any of what I'm saying to try to be political one way or the other. I'm just telling you what I think is occurring and why, what I believe. And you're absolutely free to disagree with me. I know that there are as many beliefs out there and as many political views as there are religious views, as there are ideas on different altcoins and cryptocurrencies. I know that the world is a very rich and diverse place and we all have our different opinions. So I, as one person, am sharing with you my sole opinion, and it's nothing more than that, nothing less than that. 2020, we have a pandemic. I believe that to some degree, that was a weaponized pandemic. I believe that it was used, I can already see the unfollows right now. It was used to further the next couple of years' ends. And I'll get into kind of what happened and why. And whether or not, I'm not getting into the nitty gritty here. I'm not trying to say like, oh, the virus was or wasn't created in a lab. I think it probably was. It was more likely that it was than it wasn't. It doesn't really matter, okay? It doesn't really matter. But without a doubt, that pandemic was used to further certain ends and to remove certain freedoms and to set certain balls in motion, rolling, that would affect us up until the present and into the future. Actually, I want to step it back one step further. Before the pandemic, there was actually, in the sequence of kind of like my big picture view of what I see and for why I'm bearish right now, there's actually one preceding factor that I would like to kind of arbitrarily start the sequence of events from. And that is a compromised media. Like, not every single channel or place, but like the vast majority of social media platforms had been compromised, controlled, and under the thumb of the powers that be that would unfold the actions over the next several years as we see them unfolding. So the only way that everything was able to happen the way it has for the past couple of years is because of that one factor, because the media has been controlled and the narrative has been controlled. Without that one factor, not any or not a lot of what happened could have happened. And that makes sense because the first step in a tyrannical dictatorship is to gain control of the information. Because if you have freedom of information, you have freedom of ideas. And freedom of ideas and freedom of information is a very dangerous thing in the face of a tyrant or someone who wants to overthrow a country, or someone who wants to control the narrative, et cetera, et cetera. So controlling the media, like a vast preponderance of it, there's always going to be those individual YouTube channels or those maybe smaller news channels that actually get some stuff right. There absolutely are. They do exist. They are out there. But all you need to do is control like what 80 or 90% of the population sees, and then you've got it wrapped, basically. You need a lot of Joe Rogans and a lot of Russell Brandts and a lot of Elon Musks and these guys to outweigh that media control. And we didn't really have that back in the beginning. We're starting to have that now a little bit more than we did before, only because of the necessity. But still, even today in 2022, media is heavily controlled. Dissenting opinions on any topic are heavily quashed. Critics are attacked, canceled, removed, etc., even today. So that was the first step. Compromise, control all media. You have all these different channels, whether it's CNBC, MSNBC, blah, 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 blah. You name them all. They all kind of carry the same narrative. And you saw that in full force when the next step, the pandemic, hit. And I think that the pandemic was used, like I said, it was weaponized. It was used as a means to gain control. So step one was they've got control of the communication, all the social media. Step two was create this pandemic, this disaster. And in response to a disaster, you need a solution. So what happened is the pandemic, by use of the media, scared the crap out of almost everyone. And everyone believed it. And then you had everything like vaccines roll out, and all the truth that we know today about this subject matter, which I won't get into, was not the truth back then. And we're seeing 180-degree shifts in view on this subject. But it's been years, right? And so a lot of damage has been done that only now, in retrospect, is starting to come more to light. Obviously, it's an S-curve of awareness in terms of people, early to figure that out and people late to figure that out. But the pandemic was basically weaponized in a way to gain control in specific key ways. Very clever, actually. So they've got control of the communication. They've got this pandemic. Now, what did they do with the pandemic? Well, one of the key things they did with the pandemic is they used it to create this emergency, which then was used to manipulate the election. And if you want to see a great documentary, watch 2000 Mules. Again, this is very political subject matter here, but it's stuff you're not going to hear on any of the mainstream channels. And just as a side note, I take it upon myself when researching, I research all the mainstream stuff. I mean, it's almost hard not to, right? You hear it all, but I do watch it. I watch all the mainstream stuff. I don't limit my view to only the conspiracy theory stuff. I watch all the mainstream stuff, all the stuff that you guys see too. I watch all of it. And then I also make it a point to find all the stuff that has been banned, labeled misinformation, deleted, canceled, all those doctors. I find all that information as well, and all those channels and those videos, and I watch those too. And it's really quite an experiment when you've gathered hundreds of hours of both sides and you've watched and digested both sides of the story. It really paints an interesting picture, because there's clearly one side that's not being allowed to say anything and the other side is. And the attackers will say, well, it's misinformation, so you can't let it out. Well, in any free society, the freedom of debate allows the truth to come out. And censorship is the number one tool of a dictator and a tyrant. And I'll just let that stand on its own. So the need to censor someone or censor a sector of society is really saying that you fear what they have to say. Because if you didn't fear what they had to say, you could have just let them say it, And then everyone would just judge it for themselves and be like, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would we listen to this guy? And he would just be a failure on his own. But instead, if you have to actively censor him, it just shows the fear of the truth of what he is saying. It actually validates what he is saying. So censorship is not needed in a free society. So the pandemic was used by the media to then create this image of this mass problem. And what happened with it? Well, we had an election, and this is my opinion again, an election stolen. And how was this done? It was done by a whole bunch of different methods. It was done by a bunch of drop boxes put all over the place where you could just do ballot drop-offs, and all these mail-in ballots that just got flooded across the country. And then all these, if you watched, again, 2000 Mules, you'll see a lot of the information on this. They used geo-tracking, and they actually isolated and followed individuals who were going and dropping ballots off to many different drop boxes and going to these distribution centers and getting paid to do so. That was a whole thing. Not to mention, fudging the due dates for ballots and extending it, and freezing the count in the middle of the night and these huge spikes. We don't need to revisit it more than that. In my opinion, there was a massive fraud, cover-up, and stolen election. And Joe Biden is not the legitimate president, in my opinion. History will perhaps vindicate that or not. I don't know. You're free to disagree again. But this is how I see things unfolding. So we had the control of the media, which makes all the rest possible. We have the pandemic. We have the fear created. And then we have the pandemic used, and the media is doing the telling, to control the election. And then that was thrown. Okay, so now what happens? Well, then we got a puppet president. We have Biden. He's basically a puppet. Like, I don't think that many people would agree that he's mentally competent or the best choice as a president. He's cognitively lacking, to put it nicely, I think. So you have this ridiculous president. He is a puppet. He's a puppet for the bigger picture, all starting with the compromise of the media and the pandemic and the thrown election. And then boom, they got their guy in the White House. Okay, good. So now they got this puppet president. Perfect. So what are they going to do with the puppet president? Okay, they're going to create this proxy war of Ukraine and Russia. They're going to basically piss Russia off using Ukraine and, fund it to no end, further inflating the money supply, further stealing purchasing power from everyday people like you and myself, not asking us whether we want to fund a war that kills a bunch of people or not. No, they're just going to fund this and further devalue our money. And actually, backing up one step, the pandemic was actually the greatest inflation event that we have seen almost ever. I mean, endless trillions of dollars printed and funding these COVID bills and COVID this and pandemic that and buying unlimited assets. That's what was happening back in 2020. It was Fed gone wild, inflation style. And inflation doesn't rear its head instantly. It takes time to trickle down through the economy back to the everyday Joe when he goes and buys his milk and his bread and his meat at the grocery store or his gas at the pump. It's not an instantaneous thing. So it's hard to see. It's hard to see the correlation between printing $5 or $10 trillion and the gas price doubling. But that is correlated. It's just delayed by a couple years, as we've seen. And there's no telling exactly if it's over yet. But we have definitely got it to the point where many people are unhappy about the price increases on a lot of their daily commodities and goods and groceries and gas, etc. That's a direct byproduct of inflation. So the pandemic was used to basically massively steal from the everyday person. And then they give these wimpy little stimulus checks. It's all part of this bigger plan of control and domination of people and theft, really. So they appease the American person with the $1,400 check, and then they, give $100 million to a company and bail them out, or $1 trillion in COVID pandemic relief or things like that. But the relief wasn't really needed until the government itself said, you can't be in business. So then you had no choice but to ask for the relief. So per force, every business was basically begging the government to help them out because the government said you can't keep your shop open. So it was like a self-enforced inflation event by printing all this money to bail out these businesses in the name of COVID relief. Okay, so that was the economic effects of the pandemic. And that continued through to Ukraine and massive funding of the weapons and just basically funneling all this monetary energy to this proxy war to just keep it alive, keep it alive, keep it alive. The military industrial complex loves war. War does make certain sectors of society wealthy. And so unfortunately, it is incentivized to continue and to occur. Okay, so now we've got this puppet president who's funding this war. Now, I want to kind of circle back with a concept from Ray Dalio. If you watch one of his more recent videos on these massive cycles and these, I'm doing this all from memory, but these massive regime changes between countries and the global reserve currency and how it switches from one currency to another over these tremendous breadths of time. And we were talking like 80 to 100 years or something of that nature, so long that the individual lifespan isn't long enough to generally remember the lessons from the previous cycle. And I think that's part of the reason it's allowed to repeat these cycles, is because those who experienced the war associated with such a regime change and a change of the global reserve currency occurred so long ago that people don't remember anymore that that's what happens. So I think we're on the cusp of that right now. I think that with the massive amount of inflation that's occurring and this war that seems to be escalating with Ukraine and Russia and all these European countries getting mixed up in it, and America way too, not even just mixed up in it, like causing it basically and fomenting it, we absolutely have the recipe for a worsening situation. Oh, and one more thing. In that video with Ray Dalio, war is the means for transition between empires. And that's why I think there's an increased chance on the back of everything else that we have going on right now that an escalation in war could be around the corner, because it is the method for transitioning between empires. Now, whether that equals nuclear war, I hope not. It could, though. It absolutely could. That would be one event that would massively tank the stock market. If there is a nuclear war, and I'm not saying that there is, but if there is, it will massively devastate the stock market. It will massively devastate all assets, including cryptocurrencies. If there is a nuclear war, Bitcoin will go below $10,000. Like, I feel very confident of that. And obviously, we'll have to see. Hopefully, we won't have to see. But that's why I'm keeping some cash on the sidelines. Now, not just because I think there could be a nuclear war. That's an option, though. That's a possibility. Say I give that a 10 or 20% chance. Still, that's a chance. But let's say there is not a nuclear war. That'd be a great thing. Let's just get this war over with Ukraine and Russia, and then, end that and move on with our lives. That would be the best possible outcome. But even so, there has been so much money printed and printed and printed, starting from 2000, starting with the pandemic, then onto the Ukraine and Russia war, and just not stopping. I mean, look at the president. He'll even print money to forgive student loans. He'll just print. That's what governments do. It's just the nature of fiat. It's the nature of both political parties. It is both Republican. It is both Democrat. It is every political party prints money. It's the nature of a debt-based economy, and it's how the fiat system works. It is literally the lifeblood of this fiat system. You cannot pay back the debt. Therefore, you have to keep printing more money. And eventually, that domino falls. Now, I'm not necessarily predicting the end of the US dollar here, but I am predicting that all that inflation has not finished catching up with us. And with this war that isn't over, and if you just look at the price chart, look at the price chart of Bitcoin, there's just so many factors look to me bearish. And like the Bitcoin price chart just looks like it's flatlining around $18,000 or $19,000. And it would not surprise me if we see a drop down to $15,000, $14,000 in the near future. So I'm just painting the picture of why I've got some cash on the sidelines. I wish I had more, but I wish a lot of things. And you know what? I have to deal with the situation as it is present now and the means I have now. So luckily, I do have some profits, some cash I did take. And I think that's a good place to be right now. It does make me feel like I can sleep better at night knowing that I'm at least balanced, because I guess I have to ask myself, like, what's the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario I can think of is a total stock market meltdown and depression. And I think that's a realistic possibility. Give it 33 to 50% chance in the next couple years. I think that's definitely possible. The best case scenario is the war ends, Bitcoin does not crash below $18,000, does not make a new low. We probably go sideways for a while and then begin the next upward ascent. And I think the next bull run peak will be around 2025 for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as well. And that's the best case scenario. But it would be foolish of me, I think, to not have any cash because, hate the dollar. It is the strongest currency. If you look at any price chart with the dollar against any other country, the dollar is more dominant. The dollar is gaining value against these other currencies. So the dollar is the one to be holding currently, at least for a short period of time, for 6 to 18 months, while whatever happens in the world, kind of the dust settles and we see, like, is there going to be some kind of massive issue and crash of the stock market? And if so, I'll be ready with the best, strongest asset to buy it with, to buy opportunities with. And I will absolutely be putting my money back into crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a couple of other small holdings here and there. Okay, guys, so that's the answer I've been kind of like holding back on giving you. I'm not going to break out all the different price charts and back this all up. I could be on this for like hours showing you the reasons why I think that things look very bearish. One other one that comes to mind is the MMTH, the number of stocks in the stock market that are above the 200-day moving average. That has rolled over as I predicted, and it is beginning to make lows again. It's around 20 or so, and I think that it'll go below 10 and maybe even below 5. If it does go below 10 or 5, that to me is a massive buy signal, and I will definitely begin purchasing some assets, probably Ethereum and Bitcoin at that time. And another thing is you have a housing bubble, a massive housing bubble. This is a global bubble and it's an everything bubble. That's how I see it. It encompasses almost all sectors of life, from your groceries to your house, to the mortgages, to the stock prices, and to crypto. It's literally encompassing everything. This, in my opinion, has the recipe to be bigger than 2008. It could be bigger or on par with the year 2000 crash, .com crash. Actually, I think it has a possibility to be on par with the 1920s, late 1920s, early 1930s with the Great Depression. Time will tell. I'm not saying that's for sure, but I can see it based on everything that's lined up. And it's been many decades in the making. The inflation of the dollar is not something new. It's not something that started with Biden. It's not something that started with Trump. It's not something that started with any recent president. It's been happening for the entirety as long as fiat has gone off the gold standard, really. So this is a massive, massive bubble that has been brewing for a very long time. And I think that if we don't see the entirety of it pop and collapse, which would be the biggest devastation, I think that we'll still see a very, very large and significant collapse, much bigger than we've seen so far. And so that's why I haven't been bullish lately, because I'm waiting to be bullish. I want to be bullish again, guys. I love, talking about crypto going to the moon and the next, massive climb where Bitcoin goes over 6 figures and ETH goes to 5 figures easily. That will happen. I think that will happen, I hope, in 2025, but it's going to depend on a lot of the events that unfold right now and how bad it gets. But there's always a silver lining. So I would say, look for the opportunity. And that's what I'm doing. Like, I absolutely do not want there to be a nuclear war. But if there is, and there's a crash and a collapse of the economy, then I want to be ready to buy it and to buy assets so that I can grow my value. I can help those around me if in need, and I can do what I can do to make the world a better place. I can only do that with the purchasing power that I control. So if I'm poor, then I can't help mankind very much. If I'm wealthy, I can help mankind a lot more. And that's basically why I do what I do. I want to be able to help to a maximum effect for others and those around me. And if I'm, a loser and I have no cash and, I can't really have much influence. So I'm looking for the opportunity that presents itself. Okay, guys, I know this was a way different video. I wouldn't be surprised if I get in trouble for this video or get striked or it gets taken down. I hope it doesn't, but thank you for listening to me as I share my very unique opinion. I think that the chances of all of you agreeing with everything I just said is pretty slim because I just have such a wide audience, and this is a crypto channel, right? So we mostly agree on crypto things, even then not so much. But when you step back into the fields of politics and war and pandemic and viruses and elections, I mean, I know for a fact that I've probably pissed some people off or said some things that you don't agree with. And just know that my intention is not to piss you off. It's just to have an open discussion, tell you what I think. I'm okay with being wrong. I would actually be happy to be wrong about some of the things I said. I would love to be wrong about that, but it is what I think is the truth. And that's one thing I'm always in search of, is telling the truth and sharing the truth with you guys. And you know what? Do with it what you will. It's okay. I hope this was well received, and thank you again for listening to me. And I hope you all have a great day. I'm being patient. I'm sitting on my hands and I'm being patient because I think there's going to be some massive, massive opportunities waiting ahead for us. And I hope you guys are with me for that. Take care and have a great day.